when I'm making the big point, lean forward, Bob Russell style.
First question is,
if I say something that don't make sense, you better tell me. That way I can say it another time.
okay,
Wow, kind of weird. I've not told you some of this stuff. Well, I guess you could probably say that it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. It was definitely the strangest time of my life. I was 17 and I had just graduated high school. Before Charlie got hospitalized, I was kind of like, I was looking for jobs and stuff, and I had knocked on like 9 different doors to try to get a job, and no one wanted to hire me because I was 17 years old and had no work experience. And looking back on it, I feel it was kind of the will of God that nobody wanted to hire me because I didn't know that this next season of my life was going to be so wild. And then when Charlie got sick, life completely changed. First, me and Tommy went up to Nashville to go be with Charlie, and that was when he was still at home. And then when he went to the hospital, it was kind of, it was obviously a very discouraging thing. But Tommy and I also had a lot of fun in Nashville. We went to the Grand Ole Opry. It was pretty good. There's a lot of comforts in that time. But then when Charlie got put in ICU, that was when things really got even wilder. I eventually started going up to Nashville and back and forth between Nashville and Florida every week with my dad. And we had this routine that was the exact same way every week. And we did this for probably 12 weeks in a row. And we joked that it was like Groundhog Day. Like it just happened over and over again. We would, every Monday morning we would get up, we'd go to the Punta Gorda airport. Somebody would drive us there. I think it was usually AD driving us there. And we'd go through security, we'd land in Nashville, we'd head straight to our Airbnb, and then once we got there, there was always a kid to take care of, someone to console, or going to visit Charlie. There was always something waiting for us when we got there. And then we would stay there until Wednesday, and then on Thursday morning, we'd go to the Nashville airport, and every time we went through the Nashville airport, I got patted down, which is, I don't know, they think I'm a terrorist apparently, but it's definitely interesting. And then we would go and we would sit in the same breakfast bar every day, and we would hear the same guy singing every week in the breakfast bar, and I would go up to him and write him a note to play a different song every time. I would ask him to play a Coldplay song or Willie Nelson song or something. It was definitely weird to go through the same thing every single week. And I'd come home, and on Thursday afternoon I would go to the church and I would program lights for the weekend, and then on Friday we'd do more stuff at church usually, and then on Friday evening we'd have football, and then on Saturday it was church again and playing in the band or whatever it was, and then Sunday was church again. It was just, and then very next day, Monday, back to Nashville. It was every single week, exactly the same. And I remember in that time, it was like being in Nashville was definitely weird for me, as a teenager, because it was kind of, I was in this weird phase of my life where I wasn't in school anymore, but I wasn't working anymore, and it was kind of like my job was my purpose to go there and to help take care of this family basically, and it made me grow up pretty fast. And it was definitely, it was a strange experience to take care of Charlie's daughter, Charity, at that time as well, because it was like she didn't have a father at that time. Me and Dad were like her father figures in this weird way, and it was definitely a learning experience for me, because before that I don't think I'd ever even held a baby before. And then visiting Charlie was also this strange experience. I'd not spent a whole lot of time in hospitals before that. I'd been there a couple times when Kimberly was sick or whatever, when Mom was sick, but never like this. And an ICU room with machines beeping all the time, and nurses in and out every 30 seconds or so. And Charlie was completely unresponsive at that time for the most part. I mean, he opened his eyes and would look at me every now and then. Yeah, I would just sit there and talk a lot of the times, just about whatever. Sometimes Charlie would look at me and seem like he was paying attention. Sometimes he'd have his eyes closed. One time he looked at me and was like, stop. He's annoyed with me, apparently. There was definitely some surreal things there. You know, I remember there was a nurse that didn't like us taking pictures of Charlie because it violated HIPAA regulations. And I came one day and Charlie's wife, Faith, had asked me to take a picture of him while he was doing physical therapy. And so I can't have my phone camera out. This nurse comes up to me and she goes, hey, you can't have that out right now. And you can't take pictures here. And I said, oh yeah, suey. And I pulled my phone up and I took a picture, which in hindsight was probably not the wisest thing to do, but 17-year-old me thought it was pretty cool. And then she tried to take my phone, which is also illegal. And I put my phone away, and then we argued about it for a second. She went and got a head nurse, and I explained to the head nurse that his wife, who has power of attorney, asked me to take a picture. And she said, okay, well, we need to let this cool off, then you should probably just step out and go home for a while. And you can come back later. I said, okay. And then after that nurse did not want to be Charlie's nurse anymore, which is definitely an interesting occurrence. Yeah, so I was not well liked among the nursing staff there. I came in another time, and this is when Charlie was starting to get a little bit better, and Charlie was on hallucinogenic drugs. There were some pretty interesting conversations with Charlie while he was seeing things. I came in and one day and he said he can barely talk. You know, he's like speaking through phlegm all the time. Johnny, there's a bird on my foot. I said, there's no bird on your foot, Charlie. Yeah, I know. I made invisible birds for everybody. Can you get the bird off my foot? I said, okay. And I reached out and grabbed over his foot and pulled up. He didn't get it. And I said, okay, I'll just move my hand and you can tell me when I'm touching it. That's it right there. I pulled up. Oh, there you go. Then he fell back asleep. And it was hilarious to me. I didn't laugh in front of him, but I laughed about it later. I told the whole family it was awesome. There's another time when he was a little bit more aware and a little bit more awake that he looked straight at me and dead at me. He goes, Johnny, do you see the little green man in the room? And I said, there's no little green man in the room. That's the drugs, Charlie. And he responded and said, that's the drugs, Dave. And that's a quote from one of his favorite movies, Hot Rod. And that was the first time that I realized that my brother was still in there. And, you know, it was kind of one of those sweet things. It sounds so silly, but, you know, we all had all these worries about, you know, how is his brain going to be? Is he going to have brain damage or anything like that? And in that moment, it was like, this is my brother, and he's still my brother. And he still loves Hot Rod. And it's definitely a sweet thing. And then once he was out of the hospital, then it was kind of this game of, you know, you go there and you take care of Charity part of the time, you take care of Charlie the other part of the time, and then you're just helping out, doing whatever. Charlie and I watched a lot of movies together. He tried to show me The Irishman, and I fell asleep multiple times. And I'm sure it was a good movie, but I don't remember it. And I think it's definitely been a journey to watch Charlie's mental state develop as well, because, you know, when he first got out, he was very anxiety driven, you know, very afraid, and things like that. And now I don't see that in him anymore. And I think in a lot of ways he's even surpassed the maturity he was at before he was in the hospital. And he's started to go on the uptrend again, which I think is amazing. And I'm very thankful for my brother. I'm very thankful he's alive. And I'm very thankful he's doing well and he's still in there and he's getting even better all the time. My faith was not very strong before that, but it was the experience that developed my faith, and then my faith helped me through it as it was developing. I honestly was kind of in a little bit of a rut with my faith for some of that time, and then I had kind of just that year started to renew my faith in a way. I had kind of had a heart-to-heart with God about 6 months before all that happened. And I just, laid it all out and repented. One thing that a lot of people don't talk about, gluttony is a sin. And it was funny, I read this quote by Matt Walsh that really convicted me and kind of sparked that moment. He talks about the 3 temptations of Jesus and how Satan tempted Jesus with bread, with fame, and with power. 3 temptations are, the devil tells him, turn these stones to bread, and Jesus says no, and then he says, throw yourself off this high point, let the angels save you. Jesus says, no, you don't test God. And then he says, if you bow down and worship me, all the kingdoms of the world will be yours. And he says, no, I'm never going to do that. And Satan tries to appeal to Jesus for food and power and fame. And Matt Walsh said something like, Satan would love nothing better than for us to be egotistical, power-hungry gluttons. And I looked at my life and the things that I was going through at that time, and I realized that was me. And I was so selfish, and I was a glutton. I had a food addiction. I had a porn addiction at the time, and I wanted to be a big music superstar. That was my dream. And I looked at my life and I said, what am I doing? Like, am I following God's plan or Satan's plan? And I just sat down and I repented, and I began to ditch all of those things. And it went from be a superstar to be a minister. And I abandoned my addictions. And I started looking out for others instead of for myself. I think kind of a fun mark of that is that after that I started losing weight, and I lost about 70 pounds. And I'm really proud of that. It's usually you don't think of weight loss as a Christian doctrine, but gluttony is a sin, so I'm proud of that. But my life began to change, and my faith began to change from that moment. And when I'm very thankful that I had started making that change, because I needed that before Charlie was in the hospital. And if I hadn't had that moment, I don't know if I ever would have made it through that time. And it's so interesting. I hate reading books, and it was all out of a book that someone gave me for Christmas that I didn't even want to read. For some reason, I just picked it up and started reading, and I read that quote, and it changed my life. And then when Charlie got in the hospital, it was definitely a trial of that newfound faith. And when Charlie first got on the ventilator, I was scared. And I made one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I went and I looked up the numbers, and they weren't good, and it bothered me that the odds were that Charlie was probably going to die. And then it was just kind of this waiting game. And then on day 2 of Charlie being on the ventilator is when he started really suffering. Like there were all these signs and everything of all of his vital signs were signs of suffering. And I remember I prayed to God a prayer that I really regret. And I said, God, stop the suffering and just take them already, basically. And then when Charlie kept on surviving, I found myself angry with God for that time. And then, it reminds me of, Mary and Martha looking at Lazarus' tomb. And, they see the tomb and they see a dead person, and Jesus sees Lazarus. And they complain at Jesus. They say, why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you do what we wanted you to do? Why didn't you come and heal him? When the truth is that Jesus saw way more than they did, and he had a much better plan for Lazarus. And I think in the same way, I had this complaint against God. I said, why are you letting him suffer? But God had a much bigger plan for Charlie than what I could see. And when Charlie started getting better, it was kind of this like awe moment for me, really, where it was like, wow, God really is good, and God really is real, and he really does have a reason for these things. And it was amazing to me. And really in that time is when my faith became emboldened. I had renewed my faith, and I had started to come back to being a righteous follower of Christ. But it was Charlie being in the hospital that really made my faith strong and made me love God. Even in that season where I was angry with God, I had these little glimmers of faith and these glimmers of hope. And there was this song that I kind of had on repeat at that time called Million Little Miracles. It's a song by Maverick City. Listen to that song, and it just talks about, in spite of the suffering, there's so many miracles around us, and there's so many good things. And that song was so important because, it was a season of suffering for our family and for Charlie especially, but there were also these miracles all around us. We were in Nashville. Nashville's a beautiful city. Nashville's always going to have a special place in my heart after all of that. And that was kind of its own miracle. And then charity was obviously a huge joy to us at that time. You have this dark, deathly thing going on over here, and over here you've got this newborn baby who's trying to figure out life. And it was just these polar opposites, and charity was just a huge joy to us at that time. So that song really, really spoke to me because it talks about all this suffering and about these miracles that can encourage you and get you through it. That was an encouragement to me. But there's one line in the song that always stuck out to me, and it's kind of this ad-lib portion of the song at the end where he says, even in the death of my brother, you are closer than no other. And that made me realize, even if my brother dies, God's still going to be good. He's still going to be God. And that just was really, really powerful to me. And that song was a huge encouragement. And I think it's so strangely coincidental that at that time I was suffering through something similar to what the singer was struggling through. I think that was interesting. And there was also a season afterward where, it was kind of in Charlie's recovery time, and that was when the song Firm Foundation started becoming a big song. And for me, that song was a huge encouragement. One of my favorite lines in the song is, I've still got joy in chaos. And it makes me think back on that time, and even though there was so much turmoil going on, I had this, it truly was, like the scripture says, a peace that passes understanding. And I was so thankful for that even in that time where so much was going on, there was still peace and there was still joy, even in the chaos. even when the rains came and the winds blew, this house stood strong. And it was important to me, and I was so thankful for my developing faith, and also just thankful for God and the constant encouragement and messages that He was a good God. It was like every corner I turned, there was some message from God. It was like, it's gonna be all right. And I was very thankful for that.